Hello everyone and welcome to this second episode in our story series from J&D's Haunted Journeys. Welcome to episode 2 of Jay's Haunted Tales. Today's story takes you back to the 18th century and to one of the most haunted buildings in the whole of Britain, the Tower of London. For even back then it was said to be haunted with many spirits. But this particular one takes place to when one prisoner, who was soon to become the newest addition to the ghostly encounters. Join us as we go in and read to you tonight, The Frenchman's Cell. The winter of 1758 settled over the Tower of London like a funeral shroud. Snow gathered in cracks between the ancient stones, and the River Thames rolled black beside the fortress like ink poured from the devil's own bottle. Every morning before dawn, the bells rang cold and hollow across the courtyards, waking servants, guards, prisoners, and ravens alike. Emily Harwood hated those bells. At 16 years old, she worked in the kitchens beneath the White Tower, scrubbing pots, carrying water, peeling onions until her fingers stung raw. Her father had died of fever 2 years before, and her mother, unable to feed 4 children, alone had had to send Emily into service. The kitchens were always alive. Smoke, grease, heat, voices, massive spits turned over roaring fires. Cooks shouted at scullery maids, and boys hurling barrels of salted beef. The smell of bread mixed with soot and damp stone, and above it all came the sounds from outside. Soldiers, always soldiers. Even through the thick kitchen walls, Emily had heard them drilling in the courtyards from sunrise until dusk. Left, turn! Boots slammed in unison. Present, arms! Metal clanged, and she often paused near the narrow windows to watch them from below. Rows upon rows of red-coated soldiers marched through the snow in perfect formation, their black tricorn hats set low over stern faces, while muskets rested against their shoulders. Officers barked commands until their voices echoed from the towers above. The 7 Years' War had filled England with fear. French ships stalking the seas, French armies threatened Europe, and French spies were whispered about in taverns and churches. And inside the tower itself were French prisoners, dozens of them, captured officers, sailors, messengers, men taken from shattered ships or bloodied battlefields. Most were kept in miserable stone chambers beneath the fortress. Emily had seen some only briefly, thin shadows behind iron bars, muttering in their own language. But one prisoner was different. Colonel Joseph Legrade. The first time Emily carried food to him, she expected another savage enemy. Instead, she found a man sitting quietly beside a candle, reading from a worn leather book. He looked no older than 30, dark hair touched with grey at the temples, sharp eyes, and a face weary rather than cruel. 2 guards stood outside his chamber. Set that tray down there and leave, one told her. Joseph rode when she entered, and to her surprise, he bowed, not mockingly, but properly. Emily stared awkwardly before placing the tray on the table. He stood and spoke softly in French, but she couldn't understand. Then he smiled sadly, and that was all. For months this became her routine. Every evening she carried meals through the winding stone passages toward the officer's chamber. The guards eventually trusted her because Joseph had never caused trouble. He never shouted, never threatened anyone, and he never attempted escape. He simply existed, quietly inside his prison. and always, when she entered, he stood and bowed. One evening, as she turned to leave, he said carefully, "Merci." Emily blinked. "Do you know English?" He shook his head slightly. "Little." The older guard outside chuckled. "Taught him that myself," he muttered. As weeks passed, Joseph learned more words. "Thank you," "Good evening," "Cold today." His accent remained thick, but Emily found herself smiling despite knowing she should be hating him. England and France were enemies. The newspapers called all Frenchmen butchers and tyrants. Yet Joseph never seemed monstrous, only lonely. Eventually, the guards allowed Emily to remain while he ate. At first, only 10 minutes, then longer. After enough months passed, they trusted the arrangement entirely. An hour. Every evening, the guards waited outside while Emily sat across from the French colonel, teaching him English words. "Bread," she'd say. "Bread," he repeated. "Window." "Widow." Sometimes the older guards corrected him from the corridor. No, one would laugh. "You're saying widow, not window. Different thing entirely." Joseph would grin sheepishly while Emily laughed. Those were strange evenings. Beyond the chamber walls lay war, suspicion, executions, and ghosts. Inside was candlelight and conversation. Joseph told her of France, of vineyards near Loyan, of his mother playing piano in summer evenings, of the sea battle that destroyed his ship after an encounter by the HMS Montague. "I remember fire on water," he once whispered, "men burning while swimming." Emily noticed then how his hands shook whenever distant thunder sounded. The tower itself frightened her enough already. Servants spoke continuously of hauntings, headless queens walking the battlements, children crying in empty rooms, phantom footsteps echoing where nobody stood. One cook swore she saw the ghost of Anne Boleyn herself, drifting across Tower Green carrying her severed head beneath one arm. Emily laughed at such stories during daylight. At night, she didn't laugh. Especially in the prison corridors. The air there always felt wrong, too cold, too still. Sometimes candles dimmed for no reason, and sometimes whispers drifted through empty passageways. Sometimes Emily felt someone standing directly behind her, only to turn and see nothing there. Joseph noticed her unease one evening. "You hear them also?" he asked quietly. "Hear what?" He glanced towards the walls. "The dead." Emily forced a smile. "You're trying to frighten me?" "No." His expression remained serious. "This place is full of suffering. Places remember suffering." After that, Emily began noticing strange things. A woman humming somewhere below the cells, wet footprints appearing briefly on stone floors, doors creaking open after being locked. The guards pretended bravely, but even they feared the tower after midnight, especially the younger soldiers. The older men respected the old fortress and its shadows. The younger ones mocked the stories loudly while secretly gripping their muskets tighter. Then came the night. Everything changed. Snow battered the tower walls, while winds screamed across the battlements like dying souls. The kitchens had been chaotic all evening, and Emily arrived late carrying Joseph's supper. Only 2 guards stood outside the chamber that night, young men, new recruits. Both looked barely older than boys. One yawned while the other nervously adjusted his musket strap. "Quick tonight," one muttered. "Captain says no lingering." Emily nodded and entered. Joseph stood as always, You are tired, he observed. Everyone is tired. She sat beside the table while he began slowly eating the stew and bread. The candle between them flickered strangely. Joseph frowned toward the corner, something behind her. What is it? Emily asked. He didn't answer. His face had gone pale, and slowly he stood. The candlelight dimmed, then Emily heard it, a scratching sound from the wall. Not rats, but fingernails dragging across stone. Emily turned slowly. At first, she saw nothing. Then the darkness moved. A shape emerged from the corridor, out of the chamber, a tall figure in rotten clothing, soaking black with water. Its skin hung grey from its skull. One eye dangled loose against its cheek. The smell hit next. River water and decay, and Emily froze. The figure opened its mouth and water poured out. Joseph suddenly seized Emily's arm and pulled her backward just as the thing lunged, and Emily screamed. The guards burst inside instantly, and what they saw was chaos. Emily crying, Joseph gripping her, the shadowy figure crossing the wall behind them, but the younger soldiers only saw the French prisoner holding an English girl. Get off her! One panicked, and Joseph shouted, No! Behind! The musket fired. The explosion deafened the chamber, and Emily watched as the bullet tore through Joseph's chest. He staggered backwards in shock, and blood spread across his shirt, and then the ghost vanished instantly into the darkness as Joseph collapsed. The second guard stared, horrified. Neither understood what had truly happened. Emily fell beside Joseph as blood pooled beneath them. No, no, no! He coughed weakly. His trembling hand found hers. Dark red stained her fingers. The young soldiers kept shouting over each other. He attacked her! I thought he grabbed her! Joseph tried to speak. Emily bent closer. His voice came barely as a whisper. Not your fault. Then his eyes fixed upon something behind her, and his face changed, fear and then rage. A freezing wind blasted through the chamber door. Candles extinguished instantly, and the room plunged into darkness. And from that darkness came a sound neither soldier ever forgot. A roar, not human, but filled with grief and fury. The guards fled. Emily remained kneeling beside Joseph's body, sobbing in darkness, while something unseen moved around the chamber walls. Afterwards, the tower had changed. The official report claimed that Colonel Joseph Legrade attempted violence against the servant girl and was justly shot by the alerted guards. Emily tried to tell the truth, but nobody listened. The young soldiers insisted they'd had to save her life. The older guards were quieter. Some believed her, especially when strange things began happening in Joseph's old cell. Guards assigned there heard footsteps pacing all night long. Muskets misfired mysteriously. One soldier claimed invisible hands shoved him down the stairs, and another awoke screaming after seeing a pale French officer standing beside his bed. Yet, oddly, women never suffered harm. Kitchen maids reported hearing gentle French whispers guiding them away from danger. In fact, one servant girl had fainted near a staircase and later swore unseen arms caught her before she struck the stone floor. The spirit hated soldiers, but protected young women, just as Joseph had protected Emily. Within a year, Emily left the tower forever. She could no longer bear the corridors, the bells and the ghosts, and she found work on a farm just outside of London, where the air smelled of earth instead of smoke. Eventually, she married a kind young farmer named Thomas Whitaker. They built a quiet life together with children, sheep, and golden wheat fields far from war. But Emily never forgot about the Frenchman. Sometimes in winter she would hear the wind rattling the farmhouse windows, and she remembered the candlelight flickering across the stone walls. She remembered Joseph struggling to learn English words. Window, bread, thank you. And she remembered the look in his eyes as he died. Years later, long after the war ended, travellers still spoke of haunted chamber inside the tower. Some guards even refused to stand watch there alone. They said a shadow in a torn French officer's coat wandered the room after midnight. If cruel soldiers entered, the air turned freezing cold, and unseen whispers filled their ears until madness drove them out. But if a frightened young girl passed nearby, the ghost merely bowed politely before fading into the darkness. And on certain storm-filled nights, servants claimed they heard a man softly speaking broken English from the old prison corridor. Good evening. Cold today. Thank you. And that was our story, The Frenchman's Cell. If you enjoyed the story, then please do like and follow and subscribe to our TikTok and our YouTube channels. And if you would like to hear more stories later on, then please keep an eye out, for you never know what you could hear. And thank you very much again for watching. And as Joseph may say, merci.